Most people hate their jobs because mediocrity is tolerated in the workplace to an extent that is insufferable. What is the point of having standards in the workplace if poor leadership and hypocrisy runs rampant from the top down? From corrupt managers to lazy employees, if you're a frustrated member of a team, you'll enjoy this. Because in the next 21 minutes, I'm going to address the 21 behaviors that fuck workplace culture. Starting with number 1, micromanagement. If a leader feels a need to excessively control everything their team members are doing, it robs them of their autonomy and screams, "I don't trust you." Think of your work relationship like a romantic partnership. If every time you took out the trash, started cleaning the kitchen, your partner followed you around asking what you were doing or why you were doing it that way, it would get old pretty fast. At first it seems like insignificant behavior, but if left unchecked, it can quickly become a dysfunctional pattern that destroys the health of a team. When somebody believes that letting go means losing control, they'll grip onto every detail like a lifeline and call it leadership. This often stems from the anxiety that if they're not involved in everything, that something will go wrong. And if it does, it reflects poorly on them. They may have learned early on that mistakes aren't just mistakes, they were failures, and failures had consequences. The need to oversee everything, double check, and correct things acts as a safety net to keep them from feeling exposed. And they do this because they believe if they aren't in control, everything will fall apart. Or if others had full autonomy, they wouldn't do things right, or worse, they wouldn't need them. The truth is that many people struggle with the fear of being unnecessary or dispensable. So micromanaging becomes a way to maintain relevance and prove value. But control is an illusion, and the tighter they hold on, the more they suffocate growth. This looks like hovering over people's work, struggling to delegate, or redoing tasks that don't meet their standards. It's often justified as ensuring quality, but it's actually just a deep fear to let people handle things independently. People stop thinking for themselves, innovation dies, and resentment builds. No one thrives under constant surveillance. And the irony is the more they try to control everything, the less control they actually have. Because leadership isn't about holding power, it's about building trust. Micromanaging feels like the safest way to stop things from falling apart, but the reality is that it's the very thing that's halting growth. Which leads us into number 2, favoritism. The unspoken fog that seeps its way through an organization, suffocating trust, progress, and morale. Inexperienced leaders are the most at risk for playing favorites because they gravitate towards comfort, trusting those who agree with them, make their jobs easier, or stroke their own ego. This is a mistake that I made personally in my earlier years of entrepreneurship, and it wasn't until after that team member left that I realized the damage that was done. We had someone on our team that from a technical standpoint was incredible at what they did, and they outperformed everybody else on the team. Yet at times they could be manipulative, passive-aggressive, and even childlike towards others. This went on for years, and it wasn't until after they left that I realized the dysfunction going on behind the scenes. See, favoritism doesn't just feel unfair, it creates an invisible divide. Those who feel overlooked feel unseen, undervalued, and like they're playing a game where the rules are rigged. Meanwhile, the favored individual might feel pressure to perform because they feel like their job is precarious. At its core, favoritism fuels insecurity on both sides. One group feels ignored while the other fears losing their advantage. And the person showing favoritism often justifies it by believing that some people are just better suited, more reliable, or more capable of success. Over time, this breeds resentment and creates an us versus them mentality. The entire system is designed to collapse because real success comes from a group of people where everybody feels equally valued. But all of this becomes impossible without proper communication and a willingness to address concerns. Which leads us to number 3, poor communication. People can't solve problems if they don't know they exist. The purpose of a business is to solve problems for its customers as well as provide solutions to a team. Communication or lack thereof determines how successfully this can be done. Think of it this way. You're trying to build a house with a group of people that never talk to one another. One person's laying bricks, but they don't know where the walls are supposed to go up. Another is wiring electrical with no blueprint. And the last person is putting on the roof before the foundation has even been set. The house might get built, but it's unstable with a ton of gaps and it's probably bound to collapse. That's what poor communication does. Everybody is working, but nobody's aligned. When communication is inconsistent or unclear, it creates confusion and insecurity. People are left guessing what's expected of them, trying to read between the lines and piece things together to understand what the hell's going on. The person struggling to communicate might believe they are being clear or that others should just get it. Even worse, they assume that silence means understanding. This presents as vague direction, changing priorities, or just avoiding difficult conversations. It can also look like withholding information, whether intentional or not, that leads people to make decisions without all of the information. The fix isn't more messages, more meetings, and more noise. It's intentional, direct, and transparent communication that provides clarity and alignment. But we can't fix communication and drive projects forward without the responsibility and the commitment to do so, which leads us to our next point. Number 4, lack of accountability. What you tolerate is what you endorse. Imagine being on a team where deadlines are missed, things are swept under the rug, and nobody takes ownership for anything. It's like playing a game where the scoreboard is broken and nobody knows who's winning, losing, or even the rules of the game. A culture without accountability breeds resentment. The people who pull their weight feel exhausted and underappreciated, while those who avoid responsibility get real comfortable knowing that there's no consequences. Leaders who don't enforce accountability think that they're keeping the peace by avoiding difficult conversations, when in reality they're just enabling dysfunction. This shows up as shifting the blame, making excuses, deflecting criticism, and not taking accountability when things go wrong, or setting expectations and never following up with anything, or letting underperformance slide. The message becomes clear: accountability is optional. Now, the solution isn't punishment or micromanagement. It's creating a culture where ownership is expected, mistakes are addressed, and integrity is a non-negotiable. When we do this effectively, we minimize frustration and we tackle things head on, leading us into number 5, negativity and complaining. The biggest threat to success isn't failure, it's the belief that trying is pointless. If every time you share an idea it gets shot down, or the conversation fills with reasons that it won't work, it's kind of like going home for Christmas, showing your family how much you've grown, only to be reminded of the person you used to be. You're trying to move forward, but their negativity keeps holding you back. Constant negativity drains energy, kills momentum, and makes the smallest problems feel way bigger than they need to be. And it creates an environment where people stop trying because they don't believe anything will change. Chronic complainers often believe that they're being realistic when in fact they're just being pessimistic. They think that venting is productive when in reality it's a defense mechanism to stop them from having to take action. This looks like shooting down ideas before they've been explored, focusing on problems instead of solutions, and finding the wrong in every situation. Over time, negativity repels growth and removes top performers. The people who want to progress get frustrated and leave, and the ones who stay end up dragging everybody else down. Tolerating this behavior destroys culture because nobody built anything great by focusing on why it won't work. It's also incredibly difficult to sustain momentum when there's no praise, leading us into number 6, lack of recognition. People don't need constant applause, but they do need to know that their work matters. Imagine pouring yourself into building something and nobody notices unless you do something wrong. When effort isn't acknowledged, people start to question why they're even trying, or if the effort is worth the reward. Engagement drops, resentment builds, and what used to be passion now just feels like a paycheck. Leaders who fail to recognize their team often believe that money is enough, that good work is expected, and praise should only be given for exceptional performance. What they don't realize is that people don't just work for money, they work for meaning. This shows up as rarely acknowledging contributions, failing to celebrate wins, and only giving feedback when it's negative. And over time, top performers either disengage or they leave. And the ones who stay do just enough to get by. Recognition isn't just about handing out trophies. It's about recognizing behaviors that drive success. Because when people feel valued, they tend to show up different. Leading us into number 7, resistance to change. You can't move forward when you got one foot slamming the gas and the other foot slamming the brake. Change is inevitable in any company. Markets shift, systems evolve, and strategies need to be reimagined. There will also be seasons where the way you've always done things can't carry you forward. And resisting that reality doesn't protect the business, it paralyzes it. Being resistant to change is like saying you'd rather stall in traffic than take a turn into the unknown. Change is something that triggers discomfort, and it creates a lot of uncertainty. And for many people, that feels like a loss of control. And oftentimes, the fear isn't about change itself. There's concerns that what if change is worse than what I'm currently experiencing? And the unfortunate thing is those who are resistant believe that staying the same is the safest path. They assume that change equals risk and risk equals failure, when refusing to adapt is the real danger. This can look like shutting down new ideas, resisting new strategies, or clinging to outdated processes. And over time, the business will stagnate and opportunities slip away. The world is going to keep moving forward, and those who refuse to change just get left behind. And without the willingness to evolve, you just create chaos where there could have been peace. Which leads us into number 8. Overworking and burnout culture. Burnout is what happens when effort outpaces strategy. There was a time in my life where I treated every week like it was a performance test, pushing to hit unrealistic highs and burning myself out in the process. The thing about behavior like this is that it rarely stays isolated to one place. How we approach one thing is usually how we approach everything. That's why feeling overworked tends to compound and it spills into every area of your life. Overworking can feel like commitment, but in reality, it just breeds resentment and frustration. People start feeling like no matter how much much they give, it'll never be enough. And many people believe that working harder and longer is the only path forward to success. They mistake busyness for productivity, and they think slowing down means that they'll get left behind. This looks like glorifying long hours, discouraging breaks, or creating an environment where rest makes people feel guilty. It's a culture that ends up rewarding sacrifice over efficiency, which over time kills creativity and performance. People either mentally check out or they walk away. We believe that companies and individuals need to approach designing a workflow in a way that isn't just about raising the roof once, it's about raising the floor consistently. It's about building systems that create sustainable rolling averages instead of needing heroic efforts to get the job done. And speaking of heroes, it leads me to my next point. Number 9, tolerating toxic employees. When a limb becomes infected, you amputate the limb. Picture having a leg that's moldy green. Still functions, you can walk, move, and lift, but under the surface, that infection is spreading. And if left untreated, it threatens the entire body. That's like having a team member that poisons the culture. No matter how much they produce or how extraordinary they are in their role, they put the entire team at risk. And it sends a clear message that results matter more than respect. Leaders often justify keeping toxic team members because they bring in revenue or they would be difficult to replace. But they fail to see the damage that's happening beneath the surface. This looks like excusing bad attitudes, ignoring complaints, and avoiding hard conversations because that's just how they are. And eventually, the best people leave and performance suffers, which causes the culture to rot from the inside out. No single employee, regardless of how talented they are, is worth the cost of a broken team. And sometimes the only way to save a system is to cut out the thing that's causing the rot. Which leads us to number 10, lack of clarity in roles and responsibilities. You can't hold somebody to a standard they don't know exists, or expect performance in a role they didn't even know was theirs. Think of a game where nobody knows their position, the rules keep changing, and everyone's just hoping that someone makes the winning shot. This isn't strategy, it's survival. People start running around like chickens with their heads cut off, making noise, and nobody knows where they're going. This is what happens when you don't nail down roles and responsibilities. You don't get high performance, you get a team that's too exhausted to win. Clear roles aren't just about structure. They're about efficiency, ownership, and making sure that everybody can actually do their job. Wild concept, I know. Next on our list, number 11. Passive-aggressive behavior. Hostility without the spine to be honest. Imagine trying to solve a problem, but instead of getting straightforward answers, you get backhanded compliments and sarcasm. It's like trying to read between the lines of a conversation that never actually happened. No one says what they mean, and it's like every conversation is walking through the fog with a knife held up to your back. It's not honest, and it feels like you're being tested without knowing the rules. Passive-aggressive communication on a team creates unnecessary tension and uncertainty. This looks like ignoring messages, giving sarcastic remarks instead of real feedback, procrastinating out of spite, or agreeing with something while secretly resenting it. It's conflict in disguise. Strong teams don't tolerate mind games. They address things head on, because at the end of the day, a problem unspoken is a problem unresolved. Which tees us up nicely for number 12. Gossip and office politics. The loudest voice in the rumor mill is often the one who's keeping it running. Imagine being in a workplace where every conversation feels like a game of telephone, and where decisions aren't based on merit, they're about who's whispering to who. Gossip creates paranoia, distrust, and division. People stop focusing on work and they focus on survival. Who's in, who's out, and how do they protect themselves from being the next target? Healthy teams don't operate on whispers and hidden agendas. They operate on transparency, integrity, and results. And when that's missing, it creates the breeding ground for our next point. Number 13, double standards. Your classic do as I say, not as I do. Double standards are the fast track for an unhealthy workplace. You can't really preach accountability and then turn a blind eye when your favorite drops the ball. People notice. And when they do, they stop speaking up, they stop going the extra mile, and they start playing the same unfair game. Because when expectations aren't applied equally, you throw gas on the fire of frustration and resentment. People lose respect for the leadership because fairness is negotiable. The rules need to be applied to everybody if you want to create a team that wins. And when issues arise, which they will, they need to be addressed. Which leads us into number 14, avoiding difficult conversations. The truth is only inconvenient to those who avoid it. People like to justify not having difficult conversations because, what if I have this conversation and they leave? Yes, but what if you don't and they stay? The wrong person in the room for too long will do more damage than the discomfort of just having the conversation. When problems go unaddressed, tension builds. People who avoid difficult conversations try to justify it as keeping the peace or not wanting to ruffle someone's feathers. They think for whatever reason that things will just magically work out. But problems on a team rarely just go away. So unspoken issues pile up and it turns into a full-blown crisis that could have been avoided. Strong, healthy teams don't avoid conversations. They lean into them because nothing kills trust faster than pretending a problem doesn't exist. But all of this gets perpetuated by number 15, withholding information. Your actions speak so loud that people can't hear what you're saying. When critical information is withheld, people feel frustrated and out of the loop. It leads to second guessing, wasted effort, and unnecessary mistakes. And sometimes leaders assume that people don't need to know. But lack of transparency doesn't create security, it creates dysfunction. Withholding information kills efficiency and it makes collaboration impossible. Creating a healthy workplace requires everybody to have the full picture. That way they can actually win the game instead of trying to guess the rules. Because without the ability to win, what is the point? Leading us into number 16, no growth opportunities. People crave evolution. Think of your career like playing a video game and being stuck on the same level forever. At some point, the frustration's gonna kick in and the only option left is to quit. When there's no clear path forward, people start to feel disengaged, unmotivated, and just stagnant. The ones who care the most start questioning whether or not they should stay, and the ones who don't just start settling right into complacency. This belief that some leaders have that you should just be grateful for your job completely misses the mark. People don't just work for a paycheck. They work for purpose, opportunity, and the chance to get better. If a company doesn't prioritize training and developing their teams or creating a future career path for somebody, eventually people just check out. Incredible companies don't just fill roles, they develop people. Because when employees grow, the business grows with them. But if they're not engaged, it leads to the next issue. Number 17, lack of teamwork and collaboration. Great teams don't compete with each other, they compete for each other. Imagine a rowing team where everybody paddles at their own pace in their own direction and there's no rhythm. No matter how strong the individuals are, the boat's probably not going anywhere. When teamwork is broken, tasks become more difficult than they need to be. And over time, work feels like a solo battle instead of a shared mission. Leaders who fail to prioritize collaboration make the assumption that the team will just work because each individual is skilled. But a collection of talented individuals isn't the same as a high-performing team. If the team lacks communication and has an everybody for themselves mindset, it's very difficult to move projects forward. Everything becomes a competition instead of a collaboration. The reality is that the best teams in the world move as a unit. They're aligned and committed to the same outcome. Because at the end of the day, nobody builds something great alone. But it's impossible to do great work if everybody's running around on fire, which leads me to my next point. Number 18, being reactive instead of proactive. The best problems are the ones you never had to solve. Imagine a firefighter who never checks the building for safety hazards and only rushes in when there's an emergency. The fires keep coming, and instead of preventing them, they spend all of their time and energy putting them out. That's what happens when a business leader or team is reactive instead of proactive. Constantly reacting to problems instead of preventing them just creates exhaustion and frustration. There feels like there's no sense of control because everybody's just scrambling, fixing, and trying to clean up the mess. Those who tend to operate this way say that they don't have time to get ahead of it, or they just assume it's the nature of the job. Constant firefighting is more a symptom of poor preparation than it is busyness. When this goes on for an extended period of time, it becomes chronic, and people shift from thriving and into surviving. Reactivity like this drains resources and creates a ton of uncertainty and confusion. Success isn't about handling chaos, it's about avoiding it in the first place. Leading us to number 19, rewarding the wrong behavior. What gets glorified gets repeated. Picture a team where the loudest voice gets the promotion, the rule breaker gets the raise, and the person cutting corners gets praised for results. Meanwhile, the ones that are actually putting in the work and have integrity get overlooked. At some point, people stop asking, how do I do great work? And start asking, how do I game the system? Leaders who reward the wrong behavior justify it because they're looking at short-term wins, thinking that results matter more than how they were achieved. And they assume that if the goal is hit, then the process doesn't matter. So they promote toxic employees, value speed over quality, and ignore all of the red flags, which creates an environment where survival matters more than performance. The strongest organizations don't just celebrate results, but they celebrate how those results were achieved. Because behaviors that get rewarded are the behaviors that define culture. Leading us to number 20, 20, no clear purpose. Vision isn't a luxury, it's oxygen. Imagine piling into a car with your team. There's no destination, nobody knows where they're going, and there's no purpose behind why they're doing it. At first, it's fun and spontaneous, but after a while, the frustration starts to build. Where are we going? Why are we doing this? Are we there yet? Frustration builds, the music gets turned down, and all of a sudden you have a group of people that don't really know what they're doing. That is exactly what it feels like to work on a team where there's no vision. When people don't understand the bigger picture, work starts to feel meaningless. Everything becomes a task to check off instead of a mission that you're driving forward. Leaders who fail to establish a clear vision assume that if their people are busy, the company is moving forward. But movement without direction is just wasted energy. The best organizations don't just assign tasks, they give people a mission. Because when a team understands why they're working towards something, they don't just do the job, they own it. And this gets 100 times easier when the journey is enjoyable, leading us to our final point. Number 21, lack of fun and connection. People do their best work when they're allowed to laugh while doing it. Imagine a team that operates like a machine, efficient, productive, and completely lifeless. There's no laughter, no camaraderie, just a group of people that are checking off tasks in silence. The work gets done, but the spark is gone. Without moments of lightness and human connection, everything becomes transactional. People start feeling like cogs in a machine instead of like they're doing work that actually has meaning. Engagement drops, creativity suffers, and everything feels just a little bit harder. The best teams win not just because they work hard, but because they actually enjoy the journey together. Fun and connection aren't distractions. They're the fuel that keep people engaged, creative, and committed for the long run. Nothing beats being able to win with a group of people that you love to laugh with. So those are the 21 behaviors that slowly poison a team. And if you don't spot them early, they'll wreck your culture before you even realize what happened. If you're a leader or a manager who's watching this, get proactive. Don't wait till you're full, because it takes way longer to clean up a mess than it does to make one.